Welcome, everybody, to our fifth interview in the Ivy Roadmap series. What's interesting is the first four, Mr. Jack Beecher there was on this side of the camera. And now for interview number 5, the last interview in the Ivy Roadmap series, we get to turn it around and I get to interview him. So for those that don't know a little bit of background, my name is Jack. His name is Jack. We're both Jacks. I'm the founder of collegeconsulting.us. We help high school students just like Jack, or formerly Jack, as he's about to go off to college, and parents of high schoolers, like his parents, navigate the college planning journey start to finish. And Jack did an exceptional job working through our program diligently. And guess what? He was successful in the college planning process. He was one of 2 seniors in our graduating class to end up in Ivy League acceptances, and he's going to be heading off to Dartmouth in basically 1 week from today, which is super exciting, as he heads off to 4 years at Dartmouth in Hanover, New Hampshire. Now, normally this would just be Jack, let me interview you, put this out there, but actually we have a bonus because Jack was so exceptional, I hired him for really the last 6 or so months. And for those of you who have been following along, you know his emails, you know his newsletters very well. And his summer project, honestly, was exceptional. It was what he termed the Ivy Roadmap, and I think it's perfect. Basically, a 5-lesson mini course that is now interwoven into my program to help the most elite students in the country understand the nuances of elite admissions. And when we talk about elite admissions, Jack will probably give them a little bit more background, but I'd say, honestly, probably like top 25 schools on US News and World Report, schools with single-digit acceptance rates. And yes, there are nuances to admissions when you're dealing with schools with single-digit acceptance rates. Grades and test scores no longer just cut it. And so basically this interview today is going to be 2 parts. The first will be pretty normal. I'm going to interview Jack, ask him about his Ivy experience, applying to many Ivies, getting rejected at some, getting accepted to Dartmouth, going to Dartmouth, his decision, etc. Then in the halfway part, we'll kind of flip the script. And actually, I'm just going to ask about his Ivy roadmap in general. And actually, for those of you who are watching this interview and not just listening, I'm going to share my screen briefly here so you can see his final product was exceptional. Here's the Ivy roadmap for those who can see. And as you can see, each section comes with an entire lesson, a video course that Jack has put together, multiple worksheets, cheat sheets, and here's the coolest part, the actual common applications and supplementals of the people he interviewed. Seriously. And so if you are following along and you say, where can I get this for completely free? There is an answer. I've put lesson 1, lesson 2, and 2 of these interviews live in the College Confidence community right now. All you have to do is apply to the College Confidence community, click the classroom, parent essentials, and you can watch lesson 1 and 2 of the interviews. So without further ado, I welcome Jack Beecher. How are you, Jack?
Doing fantastic. It was a great introduction.
Thank you. Well, it's easy with a student as impressive as you. So let's actually start here, Jack. Again, in the first half, we're going to talk mostly just about you, your experience, and then we'll kind of open it up to more your thoughts having completed the Ivy Roadmap project this entire summer. But let's start with you. So let's actually start way back. I'm interested in this. I know some of your interviews, actually, with your Ivy League acceptance students, you asked a question like this or similar, but I think it's important. We were just talking right before we started recording about the mindset that you had in your early high school days.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Now, I'm interested, if you can, talk to me about your mindset when it came to thinking about college, like when you were in 9th and 10th grade. And now that you have graduated in 12th grade, if you could go back, is there anything about your mindset that you might want to change or like tell your younger self?
Yeah, such a good question. I guess I was the one that kind of coined it and was asking it, but it is kind of a tough one to answer to give that sort of perspective, but it's really valuable. So 9th grade, I was always someone who I guess kind of accelerated in school and did well and thought classes weren't too hard. So I kind of just was under the mindset that would kind of continue. And then once you get to junior or senior year, you start thinking about college, you send in some applications. And if you're a good student, you'll get into good schools. So I wasn't overly concerned. I wasn't thinking about it too much. I had like a good grasp of like the type of school I wanted to go to. I knew I wanted to go to a high level school, but I didn't know what type of, like, what school exactly. I didn't have any lists so yeah, basically my mindset was it's a thing that you do when you're a junior and senior. And I mean, obviously I'm kind of setting myself up for the advice I'd give myself is it's not just a thing for juniors and seniors. The whole college admissions process it's all 4 years. You can start it as early as you want. And honestly, the better you start it, the earlier you start it, the better. So, I mean, if I had to tell myself just one thing, and if I was starting that early, it would just be to explore. I guess freshman and sophomore year in high school is really just to figure out what you're interested in. I mean, it's pretty common advice to give out, but I mean, you should really just try everything out. And I guess myself, freshman year, I was really into golf, but that's all I really did kind of freshman, sophomore year outside of school. So I wish I would have told myself, like, hey, get involved more, like test out some clubs, which I'm going to give very different advice for the later years, but freshman and sophomore year, yeah, just explore, figure out what you like, because then you can take that earlier or take that later after you kind of get your footing in different activities and figure out what you want to do.
Yep, I completely agree, and I think those who watch this, whether they're watching this on YouTube or in the program, know that I always talk about kind of the 4 areas of college admissions, right? Grades, test scores, your essays, and your story. And your story is honestly becoming more and more important every year. And I think, to reiterate what you said, you can't just say, oh, this is the story I want to tell as a 9th grader to eventual college admissions. That's really hard. 9th graders are 14, right? 15. It's really hard to be able to just say, this is the story I know I want to tell. And so it's important that 9th graders put them out there and explore in a wide fashion to truly figure out what actually catches their genuine attention, not their fake attention, right? Their genuine attention, because that is ultimately what colleges are looking for. And then I'll talk about this in the second half when I talk about some of your findings in general. But I think that then the important thing is you transition at some point in high school to saying, okay, I've spread myself wide. I know the 1 or 2 things that I really enjoy. And then what? That's when you dive deep.
Dive deep.
Okay. Talk to me a little bit about your college search. Actually, well, let's just give a little bit more context, because people don't know. Where are you calling from right now? And where do you live? Where are you from?
So I'm from Cedar Falls, Iowa. It's kind of a medium-sized town in a medium-sized state. There's not too many private schools or anything like that around me. I just go to a public school in Iowa where college admissions really isn't a focus. It's just some students apply to the top universities, but a lot of students just go to local colleges in our state. So being from this place, I wasn't too exposed to college admissions. And yeah, that's kind of the backstory of where I am.
Growing, as you went from 9th grade to 10th grade to 11th grade, at what point did you, and I'm not saying this is the ideal scenario, but at what point did you say, okay, I'm kind of I'm going to start thinking about college now? When did that come to you, and honestly, even your parents?
I guess it was pretty much last summer, which was my summer going into senior year. I knew application season was in the fall of senior year, and that's when you actually had to send in the applications, but I didn't know that there was really a process at all. I thought it was just you get on your computer, you type some essays, and you send them off and you're good. So yeah, I was kind of a little bit in for a shock last summer when I kind of looked at it and started learning. I saw stuff on TikTok or I read articles and I was like, wow, this is actually a lot more complicated than I thought it was. So that's when my parents were or my mom, more precisely, was like, hey, I found this guy. I think it was on Facebook. If you want to talk to him and maybe get some advice, and he has a college consulting program. And at first I kind of dismissed the idea. I was like, it's Mom, I can figure it out. It'll be okay. But then I ended up getting a call with him and yeah, by him, you. So I got a call with you and we talked just about some basic college admission stuff and kind of realized I'm yeah, it'd be really helpful. So joined the program, and that was last summer, which is very late compared to most people who join the program.
Definitely is. certainly is on the later side, but look, obviously you ended up succeeding. Let's actually talk through some of kind of your search and now application process. And again, to be clear, like everyone always asks me, in an ideal world, would we love to start taking students on in 9th grade and 10th grade? Absolutely. Right. And I think, you would agree with that now that you're on the other side. But guess what? You didn't, and you worked through it. Let's talk about whenever you did start to say, okay, college is a thing, which is crazy to me that might have only been last summer. Talk me through kind of your, like, how did you specifically build a school list? You knew you were targeting top schools. You had already gotten your perfect ACT score. So you were like, okay, I know kind of where I could reach, but I'm interested. Like, how did you specifically build a school list? And by the way, given that I know a little bit about this, because I helped work with it on you, it's okay if your answer is like, honestly, I focused on just a lot of the high ranked schools. That's also okay, but I think it's important for people to hear.
Yeah. Honestly, like even when I joined the program, the school list wasn't on something that was like top of my mind. It was more like I can figure out what schools I need to apply to. I just need to actually get applications done now because I started so late. And that's why, like you said, freshman and sophomore, such a benefit to join then, because then you start thinking about school lists, you develop an application strategy all before you even start your applications. I was kind of doing everything at the same time. I was figuring out what schools to apply to, applying to them, if I wanted the ED, restrictive early action. So I was kind of figuring that all out as I was doing it. Where, yeah, if you join freshman, sophomore year, then you can really kind of get all the preliminary stuff out of the way. And then you're set. You have one thing to focus on, and that's actually submitting applications. But to actually answer the question, then when I did, because, yeah, obviously I had to form some sort of school list. I could have just picked names out of a hat and apply to them. I pretty much just looked at rankings lists and kind of grabbed from the top schools I'm like, what schools are you applying to? I asked my friends and then kind of just came up with a list on my own. And then I would go. So I kind of did that at first, had tons of schools on my list. And then I kind of just did like a quick virtual tour online of each school, or I'd like look up kind of like stereotypes about that school or what that school's good at. And I kind of just got a ranking in my mind of what schools I wanted to go to and what schools I didn't want to. So yeah, it wasn't a very formal process compared to what you would recommend and what I would recommend too after going through it. But it definitely worked out in the end. And yeah.
I like it. All right, now let's talk about the application process, right? And for those of you who are watching this, right, if you're in the program, you have access to Jack Beecher's actual Common App, the actual Common App in PDF form, every single aspect of it. So as he talks about some of these, right, take a note. Feel free to hop on in as he's explaining this and walk through it. Why don't we talk through first your choice of actually when to apply? You briefly just mentioned this thing, and people are watching with all different backgrounds and knowledge in college admissions. You use words like early decision, regular decision, restrictive early action, right? You ended up actually applying your first choice, which was restrictive early action, to Princeton, right? And you ended up getting rejected. I'm interested because here we are, right? We're having this conversation. It's called the Ivy Roadmap. You're an elite student. Everyone who's watching this is going to be saying, oh my goodness, Jack Beecher, you're like the icon. And I think it's important for people to hear, like, you got rejected from your top choice school. Any kind of like comments on that, if you don't mind?
Yeah, I mean, pretty much all of the college application process is dealing with no. It's dealing with rejection. It's kind of like rejection therapy. You just have to put your name in the hat for all the different schools and just kind of bank on getting lucky in some sense. I mean, it's not all luck, but so yeah, you got to be fit to deal with reaction and or rejection. So yeah, I got rejected from my top choice, Princeton. But I mean, that's kind of what my strategy was: apply to a lot of the top schools so I can tank a lot of rejections and then ultimately get the 1 or 2 acceptances, which I did that I wanted. And then you're all good, because if you apply to 20 schools, you don't need to get into 15. You only need to get into 1. And so yeah, rejection is definitely a huge part of the process. And yeah, I guess I can go back and actually explain the restrictive early action and early decision and kind of my thoughts on that too. So when I was a junior, the spring of my junior year, I had no idea what any of those words meant. I remember talking to my friend in one of our classes. He was asking me if I was going to ED anywhere. And I was like, what does that mean? I was like, so yeah, I was definitely pretty late in that whole lingo and nomenclature. So definitely don't worry about it right now. you heard those words and are like, wait, what does that mean? You have time, and I'm hopefully going to explain it pretty well, so clear up some of the confusion. So early decision is a binding way to apply to college. So you let colleges know, you're like, okay, basically you are my top choice. I'm going to apply, which is, you're going to apply early as well. So the applications typically due November 1. So compared to the typical January 1st for just normal regular decision, you apply early and you get a boost increase in your admissions chances. Since you're telling them, hey, if I get into your school, I will go, they're more likely to admit you. So that's early decision. But what I did was restrictive early action. So some of the top schools like Princeton, Harvard, Stanford, Yale, they know that if you get into their school, you're going to go because it's some of the best schools. So they do a thing where you can still apply early, but it's not binding if you go. What gives it the word restrictive is you can't apply to any other private universities early. So I, building my school list late, didn't really have any top first choice. I visited some schools throughout like the summers of sophomore and junior year, but I didn't have a top choice that I knew I would want to go to no matter what. So I just settled on restrictive early action. I like Princeton a lot, so figured I'd put my name in the hat there. Didn't get in, but like I said, it's rejection therapy. It's kind of the name of the game.
Excellent. Well, that's a great overview. And what we'll do in a second here is we'll actually transition our conversation to, well, yes, to an extent in college admissions, there is that notion of you've got to rely on some luck. To an extent, that is absolutely the case. What we'll transition to in a second is what you spent literally your entire summer on. And that is how to at least move that needle more in your favor. Yeah. So if you say, oh, it's all luck, well, I think that what you learned, right, is with a proactive approach, a long period of time, you can at least skew it. So yes, you're never going to eliminate luck entirely. I think we'd all agree, but you can at least give yourself a better chance, right? Before we get to that though, let's actually talk about your ultimate decision, because you ended up after this whole process, right, coming down to two incredible schools that you were into. For those who want to know, Jack was accepted regular decision to both Dartmouth and Vanderbilt. Just to put in perspective, so everyone knows, Vanderbilt's regular decision admissions rate hovers in the high 4%. Seriously. They take a vast majority of their class in the early decision window. So the fact that Jack gained acceptance to Vanderbilt in the regular decision window is pretty exceptional. To be clear, yes, I did go to Vanderbilt. Even I myself, 12 years ago, was waitlisted before I got into Vanderbilt. So that just goes to show Jack's amazing background and his application that he put together. He was also accepted regular decision to Dartmouth, which, by the way, has likely an even lower admissions rate. Off the top of my head, I think it's like low 4%, maybe even high 3s in the regular admissions window. He then had the month of April to decide, and Jack, if I recall, it took you basically the entire month. Help some people out for those who are listening to this and actually do end up having the opportunity to decide between two elite, notable, incredible schools. How did you ultimately make your decision?
Yeah, the decision was definitely tough. I spent the month of April going back and forth, flip-flopping. I was like, okay, Dartmouth, okay, Vandy, okay, Dartmouth. And I was kind of never really, like, it was literally day to day. Like, I could not, for the life of me, pull up my computer and put my deposit down for either school. And you were thankfully very helpful in that. I had a couple meetings with you and could talk that out. But definitely going through that process, I realized I was like, wouldn't it have been nice if I ED'd to one of these schools and just got in and didn't have to think about it. But I'm very blessed with the decision I did have. And ultimately, there's no kind of method that I used to narrow it down. I kind of over obsessed about every minor detail. I used the decision matrix, which the program provides, and that was helpful to an extent until I realized they're about tied still. So I realized that it was just going to have to be a gut call, and they were both great schools, and I know whatever I ended up picking, I was going to be happy with. So I kind of had to accept that fact. And then ultimately, after visiting both schools, Dartmouth felt a little bit more, it just felt different. Vanderbilt had a very typical, what I expected out of college. And I really liked everything about Vanderbilt. Thought I was going there for the week after that. And then I went to Dartmouth and I kind of just felt like it was a different kind of place. And I was like, you know what? I like to be different. I might as well try it out, give it a go. And like I said, I knew I was going to be happy with either choice. So I just picked it, committed to it mentally, had a meeting with you, talked it over, and was feeling confident about it. And I still am. So yeah, there's not really a direct, like, here's how to choose if you're put in the situation. It's a struggle. It sucked. I really did not like that month. Like a couple of weeks there, I was really fretting over that decision 24/7, but now I'm happy it worked out. So yeah.
And it's interesting. People decide in all different ways, right? A couple takeaways I just want to give the listeners there. First is, if as a student you do have a top choice school, I strongly encourage you to consider applying in the early decision window if it's offered. So many reasons. First is your chances of admission just increase. I actually have a YouTube video. It's my most popular YouTube video of all time, called The Two Cheat Codes in College Admissions. You can go back and watch it. Hint, early decision is obviously one of them, right? Now there's some drawbacks, it's binding, etc. But if you have a top choice school, it improves your admissions chances. But a second reason is actually what you just hinted at, which is it can help with decision fatigue, right? Getting all the way to the end when, a lot of your peers are into school and they've decided, and you're hanging on in the last weeks of April having to decide, not the easiest. And so for some people, if you do prepare ahead of time and can apply early decision, which again, not everyone can, it can help make it so that like draining emotional decision over the month of April doesn't have to occur. Now, if you do get to the point where you have an amazing problem like you had, which is, I'm into two elite schools, how do I decide between the two, right? Then I think it's important to really balance the, I would say, emotional decision state, which is what you certainly just talked through. And yes, some more objectivity. And in our program, we have what's called the decision matrix to help you kind of rank the qualities of schools. Now, unfortunately, in your case, you went through the whole decision matrix and they ended up being even closer tied than you thought. So, but it's at least a tool that you can use.
Yeah. I will
Excellent.
Sorry to interrupt, but
now keep going.
Everyone's going to have their, like, a completely different path through college admissions. And that is completely true with picking a school at the end, but definitely having the program just to like kind of guide me through my path and how I wanted to choose a college was fantastic.
I love it. Excellent. And honestly, at this point now, having done this for 13 plus years, you actually helped me, Jack, because at this point, I've got almost every Ivy League school on my list in terms of where students have gone, and I was missing Dartmouth. So you've officially helped me as a coach check that box, getting one school closer to having all the Ivy League. Well, I'm proud of you, Jack.
Thank you.
I know that you're going to do great at Dartmouth. And we'll kind of transition now to the second phase, which is just your general understandings of kind of what you learned with your Ivy roadmap. But before we do, to finish on the Dartmouth front for you specifically, for those listeners who were there, I just got an email from my mother this morning saying how much she's appreciated seeing all of your newsletters and your work this summer. For those who are listening, Jack's not going to be entirely going away. He still will actually be available on a very part-time basis to our paying members of the program for actually one-on-one lessons for to hear the experience of a student who is currently at an Ivy League school. So that's part of the Ivy roadmap. For those who are in the program, they'll actually get to talk with Jack one-on-one should they want, which I think is pretty cool, right? To be able to say, hey, you're at a school where I hope to attend one day, or a similar school. What would you do working backwards? So with that, let's actually transition to your Ivy roadmap. Again, I'm going to share my screen for a second because it's that exceptional. The Ivy roadmap, you can see it here just in Google Drive form, but again, we have it already posted in the College Confidence community. If you go into the classroom and you click Parent Essentials, which you can see right here, then you can see the Ivy roadmap has a section. Anything that's listed as draft, yes, it exists, but no, it is not available for free. But those that are posted without draft, guess what? They're available entirely for free for you. And now for the next however many minutes, let's kind of talk through some of your takeaways. You went through a lot. I'll just bring up here just to show some of the availabilities in the Ivy roadmap and what you went through. First of all, here are your 4 interviews. They're live right here. Second, here are all the Common Apps of those people that you interviewed. Third, we have tons of resources, including your favorite articles on how to get into, the elite colleges in the world. And then you even have what's called an extended cheat sheet, which is you took all 5 of your lessons, which, yes, were video lessons with action items and worksheets, and you made them succinct and put them into bullet form for all with elite links, etc. So pretty exceptional. I am lucky today because you created all of this. And so let's walk through, Jack, if you don't mind. This is going to be super vague and you can take it wherever you want, but you spent an entire summer on this project. What you produced was absolutely exceptional, elite work. Give me some of your biggest takeaways.
Yeah. So I'm going to actually pull up the cheat sheet to kind of help myself through this, but
Absolutely.
yeah, I like this, this variation of the interview more where I get to break down what I learned from other people, because to be honest, my actual experience with college admissions, I was late to the game. I wasn't prepared. But I feel like I've spent this last year since admissions taking my college admissions game to the next level and learning so many things I wish I knew beforehand. So now I actually get to like distill the wisdom I want to. So yeah, I guess earlier I touched on exploration. Freshman and sophomore year, it's all about exploration. That would be like the one word I'd give it. And I don't even talk about that too much in the Ivy roadmap, but that's pretty self-explanatory. It's all about exploring, and yeah, touched on what that kind of means. The one piece of advice stemming from the whole Ivy roadmap that I'd take and apply to junior and senior year would be the word focus. So as much as the first 2 years are exploration, the second 2 years are focus. So once you figure out, after 2 years of exploring, joining any club you want, participating in every single event you can with your friends, then you get to figure out what you want to focus on. And I think focus really is the key word. It's kind of the word that I let to use guide my life in everything, not just college admissions. So yeah, and the whole Ivy roadmap is built on that topic of focus. And I kind of use that word throughout and break down how that word applies in each facet of college admissions, of activities, essays, grades, standardized testing. So yeah, focus and exploration are the two words if you just have to think about college admissions that you should just have a heuristic for.
I could not agree more. I could not agree more. And again, for those who are listening, I want to be clear. This entire topic of conversation right now is we are focusing on the most elite colleges in the country. We are focusing on top 25 schools or about. And oftentimes I get asked, where are you getting your top 25? I don't know. You could say US News and World Report, even though part of me doesn't really like US News and World Report. But the bigger point that I think we're trying to say is like single digit acceptance rate schools. Those schools that are rejecting 90+% of applicants. You know, if you are totally fine going to having your child go to, you know, your local state school and grades and test scores are there, then by all means, that is a very acceptable decision. From here on out, the next however many minutes, we're talking about if your child wants the best chance at these top elite, typically private schools, then listen up, because I could not agree that this notion of exploring early in high school so that you actually can figure out what you're passionate about, and then in the back half of high school, junior and senior year, diving deep into those areas of focus is really, really important. If you recall, Jack, right, one of the articles that you actually put in the resources was the article that talks about how this like notion that college is a crapshoot. Mm-hmm. And putting it in quotes, by the way, because I think that you've learned to that may be the case to some extent, but I think it is overemphasized because college is a crapshoot is the case for most students that don't know how to prepare for elite college admissions. Can you just, I guess, with college as a crapshoot and that kind of notion, plus this area of focus, can you kind of talk to me what you discovered there and how those students that you interviewed, the ones who got admitted to Harvard and Stanford and Brown, what did they do differently that kind of helped separate themselves? So college was less of a crapshoot for them.
Yeah. And I will caveat this with, I feel like my own application fell into the crapshoot pile. So it's definitely, now that I've learned after how to avoid that, I wish I would have done so many things differently. But you're right. There's a whole article like that's a common thing. College admissions is a crapshoot. But as that article argued for, that's not really the case. And there's also another article in the resources document that has the Harvard admission data that they have. I'll briefly explain how they admit students, but they rank students in 4 different categories on a scale of 1 through 6. And basically, if you get a 1, which is the best in any of those categories, you're having over 50% chance of getting into Harvard just with 1. And that is not entirely a crapshoot, as obviously that percentage implies. So yeah, I'll break down kind of what I got from the students I interviewed and how they avoided that crapshoot. So the crapshoot comes because a lot of students are really, really exceptional at a lot of things. To kind of put that into like numbers, I think 6,000 people got a perfect ACT score, which when I tell people I got like a perfect ACT score and got rejected from a bunch of schools, they're like, how does that even work? Like, I thought that's what it was all about. But yeah, if you think about it that way, that 6,000 people get perfect ACTs, not even talking about SAT scores yet. And Harvard can only admit 1,500, 2,000 students. Well, even if they only could pick from the 36s, that's a 33% admissions chance. So that's where the crapshoot is. People are spread across in so many great ways, and people have so many great stats. But there is a way to kind of avoid that averageness of like, it's not average because it's obviously elite students, and you'll see breakdowns of people's applications, and they were in 6 different clubs as president and contributed this to their school and this to their school and this to their school. And the thing is, they almost did too many things because they were like every other student that did so many exceptional things, where mostly, for the most part, the students I interviewed kind of avoided that niche, and they went their own direction by choosing to become exceptional in a couple core fields. I'll give the example of, and that picture explains it great. I'll kind of explain that first. So yeah, being well-rounded, being exceptional at everything, you never become excellent in any one thing. But instead, if you kind of develop that spike or the area of excellence, which I like to call it, and focus on one thing and become elite at it, you get into the pink zone. And the way I describe it is colleges only care about the pink zone. People only care about what you're good at. And that applies to everything in life, right? Like, you don't care if your neurosurgeon is a good baseball player. I mean, he's a neurosurgeon, right? You want him to do good at that. So that's kind of the theme I noticed with the interviews I did. One student, my friend, his name's Akshat, was exceptional at developing an area of excellence. And that area of excellence was in the sciences and in research, because he wants to be a doctor. So he spent his summers doing research activities. And then he spent his school year dominating science club, going to Science Bowl, which is a trivia competition for science that they went to nationals in. So he kind of dominated the science area, more specifically like the chemistry, biology sciences. And that was his area of excellence. I mean, he also did a good amount of other things, but for the most part, most of his main activities were related to that area of excellence. And it worked well for him because he got admitted to Brown. That was the same with another one of my friends that got admitted to Brown. His area of excellence was public health and working on public health policy and equality in his city through health. So he had like a couple clubs, and I think was like a speaker or like a leader of a different, I don't know exactly what his activities were, but they're all sort of related to that field. And that's when you apply for public health degree, they're like, well, yeah, the student definitely gets that field. So that's what he was excellent at. And both of the other students I interviewed had similar cases of excellence in a couple of their activities that all kind of threaded together. Because I think that is when people talk about developing a spike, I think a lot of the times people think that is just one activity, which in our program, we do like to talk about the one showstopper activity, which, yeah, you highlight right there. But your area of excellence can be more than just one activity. You can also have the supporting activities, which I mentioned there too, which kind of just all blend into your area of excellence. And I think that scares a lot of people when we talk about spikes, because it's like, well, I don't want to just do one thing. I don't want to just do this club and be really good at it. And yeah, that's about 50% of what I was trying to say with your area of excellence. But the other 50% can be from like the other clubs that you're in that relate to that field. So basically, long story short, talked for a long time. Yeah, develop an area of excellence and kind of have a focused area that you really want to dive deep in.
Absolutely. And I think we see, by the way, what I have seen now in 13 years of doing this has become more and more important every year. Now, I'll use another Ivy League school as data because I was just reviewing this. Cornell's admissions rate in the year 2000 was 31%. I'm going to go out on a limb, Jack, and say in the year 2000, if you had elite SAT scores or ACT, and you had elite grades that were above the average for Cornell, To be honest, did you need in the year 2000 this elite area of excellence? I mean, it would have helped, but I'll tell you this. I think you were much more likely to get in than without an area of excellence.
Yeah.
Fast forward to today. Cornell's admissions rate last year was 7%. And you can see why when parents are like, why is this all different new these days? I mean, there you go, right? They went from accepting 31% at Cornell to 7%. You can see why these things are becoming more important. And so I think part of the theme of this summer project for you was it's a new era of college admissions. Instead of hiding from it, let's embrace it and actually help families out there succeed. On the theme of focus, I actually want to talk about kind of your lesson 3, 4, and 5 here. So the first thing is, talk to me. In your 4 interviews, what did you learn about grades and test scores? What did people tell you about?
Pretty much common theme, all 4 interviews, great grades and test scores, near perfect ACT, SAT, and pretty much above 4.0, perfect GPA, mostly maybe like 1 or 2 Bs, but mostly As everywhere. And that was almost in the way they talked about it, which again, go watch the interviews. Those people are very smart about college admissions, and it's very helpful insight. They were very nonchalant about their grades. They're like, yeah, 4.4 GPA, 35 ACT. That's it. Like, that was kind of the common theme I picked up on. It was just the standard. It's just what you did. It wasn't something you thought too much about or overly stressed about. Like, yes, classes will be hard. Yes, it will be a lot of work sometimes, but that's kind of the price you have to pay to get into top level universities. And that's just the benchmark, is how they talked about it. So honestly, we didn't spend that much time talking about grades and test scores. It was mostly just like, yeah, I took 5 APs last year, got all A's. Like, just it's a hard world for college admissions, and that's seen as the standard.
Yeah, and honestly, I'm glad that you said that. I was hoping that you were going to say that because it's the truth for anyone listening to this. We're talking about things like area of excellence and standing out with your category 4 of admission. And let me be very, very clear. None of this matters if your high schooler doesn't have the grades and test scores to back it up. And yes, we're in an era where it's technically test optional. I know someone's going to comment on this video and be like, test optional. Yes, we are. But just for everyone out there, 91% of Princeton's admitted class last year submitted a test score. 9% got in without submitting a test score. I'm only putting that out there because if you're watching this, you're probably trying to put your child in the best position for success. And going the test optional route is not going to do that. It's going to hurt them. Will it make it impossible? No, 9% got into Princeton last year without it, but it's going to make it a lot harder. So for the sake of this and the sake of our coaching that we always give, it's act as if the test is mandatory until the last second. On the grades front, though, before we then move on to your lesson 4 and 5 here, for those who are listening, if you say, well, that's crazy, my child, I just know them and straight A's, elite level grades, it's just not going to be a thing. I beg to differ. I myself was the definition of a grind student in high school. And yes, I got mostly A's, but I definitely got a handful of B's. And I remember being like, I just would love to be one of those more like seemingly effortless students, right? And we were just talking about this before the interview, but this is actually my actual copy of a book that changed my life, How to Become a Straight A Student by Newport. I bought it in 2008 and it still has my notes, etc. in it. This taught me to treat learning and taking classes like a process instead of just a wing it every time and hope. This taught me that there is a process to getting straight A's. And if you embrace it and you actually complete the process, you will do far less homework, you will get far more sleep, and you will get far more A's. In fact, seriously, after I read this book, I read it in between summer of junior year and fall of senior year. And I went from that grind student who is like scraping out the A- and getting no sleep to I got a 4.0. That's unweighted, by the way. Weighted was whatever it was. Senior year, straight A's, didn't get an A-. And I felt like I probably truly did half of the amount of homework. It's because I was studying in the right ways. I was learning about things like the quiz and recall method to study and not just arbitrarily reading pages in a textbook. I was learning about things like how to prioritize and look at the rubric and say, this has an exorbitant amount on the grade. I should therefore allocate my resources towards that and not the thing that counts for 1% of the grade. Versus the old me used to just say, well, it's all there, so I'll just try to do it all. Again, the theme of focus, right? Focus on what is important and ignore the noise. Before we move on to kind of your last supplementary tips that you learned, any thoughts from you on grades before moving on?
I think that book is
Yeah.
our thoughts both on grades. And I think if any family is serious about wanting to get in top tier universities, or really just wanting effortlessly better grades, it's definitely worth the read. I think a lot of grades are just mindset and how you approach school with systems, where it's a lot less work when you actually have the right systems in place. And that book describes it, I think, better than either of us could.
I love it. All right, let's go to lessons 4 and 5, the final 2 lessons. And again, to be clear for those who are like, where are these coming from? Jack interviewed 4 elite students who all got in. We have Harvard, Stanford, Brown, and Brown. On top of that, Jack obviously did a bunch of his own research and combined his own experiences. This was pretty cool. I let Jack run with this summer, and honestly, it was amazing. But let's finish up with first essay tips, since I know that was always in every one of your interviews this summer. You talked about essays. And for those who are listening, if you want to follow along, go into the Common App folder, go and you can actually see the exact essays that were mentioned in the interviews that we provide. The actual essays, seriously. So let's start with essays, and then we'll go into just kind of general, like we'll call it gamesmanship, like understanding the game of college and how to apply and how to give yourself the best chance of success. What did you learn in general about essays?
Yeah, so I've always been really fascinated with like language and how to like project yourself onto a page of paper, which is basically what college essays are. And I think a lot of people have almost a boxed mindset when it comes to essays. So in that lesson, I tried to just break down everything that really matters about essays once you're done with the rough draft and editing and refining, and what college admissions officers are looking for in your essays. So I talked about that, and then I made it really simple by just listing out the tips I kind of used myself, gave to my friends when I read their essays, and would give to any students that are currently in the process of having to write essays. Because yeah, essays is like the one thing everybody dreads about college admissions, and for good reason. It is the hardest part. And it's also one of the most important parts. So to kind of touch on some of the essay tips I gave, they all have to do with what I was talking about language. I talked about overstatement, and how a lot of times applicants use overstatement because they think it'll prove to the admissions officers that they're very impressive students, when oftentimes that has the inverse effect of actually losing the reader's trust. Yeah, a couple examples of that right there are when students say, I love math. Math has been my entire life. Like, I think in numbers 24/7. The last 3 things I just said were all lies. Like, I really enjoy math. I don't quite know if I love it. I don't quite know if I even understand what the word love means. So that'd be a hard word to use. And when you do use that, college admissions officers they don't trust you as much. And then when you do say something that's true about yourself and about the college, they might not actually believe it. So avoid overstatement. And then along with that is you got to avoid the common words that everyone uses. The top one there is unique. I think unique is the most bizarre word in the dictionary that people might use in an essay when talking about a college, because unique, I mean, if you actually look up the dictionary definition, it's completely one of a kind, nothing at all like it. We were talking about like snowflakes, and people are unique, but the college's math department you're applying to is not unique. There's probably a lot of math departments that are very similar or have similar classes. So yeah, I kind of go more into depth on those tips and why those matter a lot more than people think. But that's just kind of the gist of it. And then I'd skip down to like tip number 5, I think is probably the most important tip you could give, which is it takes a lot of work to write a really good essay. You're not going to write rough draft 1 and just stick with it and be done. Like I said, version 41 is better than version 1. And I think for me, I did probably get to about version 41 of my main essay. Kept refining it, because there will always be stuff to improve. And yeah, you just give it the time it needs. You give it the repetitions, and it'll end up working itself out. So yeah, that's kind of the number 1 tip. And then everything else is good to help make those revisions.
I love it. And again, for those who are watching, following along, you can go into the Common Apps folder. Don't worry, this will be linked beyond just Google Drive. And check this out. see Jack's actual comment app, and if you scroll down to the essay, look at this. You can see his actual essay, and believe me, I know this essay like the back of my hand at this point. So you can go check that out. Awesome. Let's finish up here, Jack, and let you get on your way to, I don't know, packing for Dartmouth since you're leaving in less than a week. Let's finish up with the game. Right now, we briefly mentioned this whole ED REA thing. I get it. I think I'm actually going to stop sharing so I can just kind of hear you naturally explain it. But if there's anything that I took away from your 4 interviews, it was that all of your interviewees certainly had an understanding of the college admissions game to some extent, right? And it might seem basic, but I can't tell you, my most popular video of all time on YouTube is the 2 cheat codes to college admissions. And believe me, when I made it, I was like, oh, this is so basic, everyone will know it. And I get comment after comment still about this is amazing. And it was literally early decision, and it was craft your story. These are the 2 cheat codes. Like, if you actually have a crafted story that aligns with what you want to do in college, and you can show that in your application, and you understand the value of early decision, or just honestly understand when deadlines are and how to play that game, you can put yourself in a better position. That doesn't require the same as taking 8 AP classes, right? It's like little things at the end before you apply that can be the difference. So I'm going to pause there. In terms of like application strategy, everything from quantity of schools to when to apply to all of that, summarize, what did you learn from these elite students?
Yeah. So I'd say, first of all, it's best if you guys are actually in the program to watch that video, because I spent a lot of time thinking about that, how I wanted to format my thoughts, because it's pretty complicated. I mean, we're talking about like strategy, like actually how you want to carry out your applications. So yeah, definitely watch that if you have access to it. But I would say, like any game, college admissions is very individualistic. Everyone's going to have a different way to approach that. And I tried to highlight all those different approaches in that video. I mean, it's just like in a basketball game. If you're 7 feet tall, you're going to play a little differently than like a 5'9" guard. You just have to. You have different stats. You have different work ethic. You have different movement patterns. Like, everything's different. And it's the same as if you're applying to a school as like a really good writer who can churn out essays super fast, super well, compared to someone who needs to slow down and really take their time and put care and effort into their essays. So I highlighted that difference in that video, where I talked about me, who applied to 22 schools and got into a couple elite ones, versus a student I interviewed who only applied to 4, 2 of those being Harvard and Stanford, and ended up getting into Stanford. So there's different approaches, and that's the thing I need to highlight first, is that everyone can approach it in their own way to what suits their strengths. But then once we get past that, there are a lot of basic tips that kind of share out to everyone. So ED, REA, early action, that's a lot of the game. So we talked about early decision earlier. If I would have applied to Dartmouth early decision, I would have had a 21% acceptance rate compared to the low 4, high 3% acceptance rate that I had.
That you still got in. But again, for those listening, right, you can see how this decision and understanding, we're talking about a 17% chance increase. Now, yes, again, there are nuances that come with it. It would have had to be binding. Jack would have actually had to know he wanted to go to Dartmouth over Vanderbilt. He would have had to have his application in time, which in our typical program is not an issue. But when someone like Jack joins as late as they do, it can become an issue. They're all things like that. But again, to just emphasize what you said, can you give those 2 percentages again?
Yeah. So this is the focus, right? This is one thing you can do to 17% increase your chance from high 3, low 4%, somewhere around there, regular decision, to 21% early decision. I think that was last year's data. So it's probably a little different this year. But yeah, that's where the word focus comes from, right? Because that's one thing that can 5x increase your admission chances, which nothing else in college admissions is going to help you as much as that does. So once you decide, early decision, and then we can talk about restrictive early action too, but that's kind of a subsection of early decision. Then you got to actually build a school list. And I saved that for lesson 5 of the Ivy Roadmap when I talked to elite students about how to build elite school lists. Because this is the one thing that I really wish I had. Because as I said, I kind of stumbled through my school list and applications at the same time. And I ended up applying to schools like the University of Michigan, University of Virginia, University of North Carolina, which are really good schools. But I realized once I actually got into a school like that in the University of Virginia, it didn't make financial sense to attend an out-of-state public university. And I wish I had that kind of in mind before when I was actually going through my strategy to know to avoid applying to schools like that. Instead, focus more of my time on the 8 Ivies and Stanford and MIT and those schools. So yeah, that's a big part of the strategy is actually building your school list. And again, it's all personalized. It's what you're looking for. It's like me, I wish I would go back and apply to maybe like 15 schools, all very elite, because at the end of the day, if I didn't get into any of them, I would have been very content going to my local state university, University of Iowa. So there is, for a lot of students, you need reaches and targets and probable schools, but it depends on your situation. And I didn't fall into that situation. So I wish I maybe avoided applying to some schools that fell into that probable category that I didn't really want to attend that bad. And then there's also a whole early action strategy. You can apply to schools early action, which if you don't know what that means, it's just you apply a couple months earlier than you normally would, and you get your decision back a couple months earlier than you normally would. There's not a boost in admissions chances or anything. You just simply know earlier. And that's really nice, right? Because if you realize you got into a school in January, maybe there was a January 15th deadline of a school that you didn't want to go to as much as the school you just got into, whose application you no longer have to complete. So there's a lot of nuances like that in blending in where you apply early, where you apply early decision, what schools you even apply to in the first place. And I tried to put all of that information in that lesson.
I love it. And I think kind of the two takeaways there, right? One, which obviously isn't going to be as helpful for those families who are just listening to this and aren't talking with us. One is, though, it needs to be personalized. And I think what a family can do, like if they're not talking with us or in our program, they can still actually just have a sit down conversation. Like the example in your scenario, Jack, would have been you and your parents in the fall of senior year have a sit down conversation and say, what schools, if you get in, will you go to above University of Iowa? Right. And something tells me, obviously, right, you never had that conversation, and that's okay. But for those parents who are listening right now and they've got the freshman and sophomore or junior, you can have that conversation where you can say, hey, here are the schools that I would go to. Right. And then that can help define your school list. Like in your answer, based on everything you told me, the answer was not University of Virginia. Right. And so therefore, right, you didn't need to apply, but you ended up applying, and that's okay. But I think that's the biggest thing is from a personalized standpoint, the more you and your family talk through it, the better. And then the second notion that I would say is prioritizing schools on your list, like actually ranking them, is really, really helpful. Even if you can't say, oh, this one is number 4 and this one's number 5, you can probably bucket them into areas of priority. And the reason this is helpful is for scenarios like you just said, which is if you get into a bucket 2 school, say you have 5 buckets, right? Like from I super want to go there to I don't really want to go there. You get into a category 2 school, then guess what? You probably don't need to apply to category 3, 4, and 5 schools. And that's where that applying in the early window can help, because you can get that decision back and it can actually, you can know before you have to apply in that regular window.
Great tip. I like the bucket idea.
Yeah.
Discuss that more.
Yeah. Well, fantastic, Jack. Again, I'm super proud of you for the project. It is absolutely incredible. It blew my wildest expectations out of the water. And for those who are listening to this, again, this is just the tip of the iceberg. My goodness, you can spend days of your life in Jack's Ivy roadmap. He spent days of his life creating it. And then he narrowed it down to 5 15-minute lessons for everyone out there, a handful of cheat sheets, and 4 linked interviews that even are time-stamped. You even time-stamp the interviews if you're struck for time and you say, oh, I want to hear about, you can go on YouTube, look at the timestamps, click through and find what you want. All right. That is all I had, Jack. You've got 6 days till you head off to your Ivy League school. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Proud of you. Well done. Not just obviously for your success in the program as a student, but actually, as crazy as this sounds, as a peer to me, working through our program this summer and working for the program to help better next generations of high schoolers. So I'm proud of you. Any parting words?
The best college admissions advice I got, which is actually sit down and say what you're going to college for. Give the detailed reasons of why you want to go to college, and everything will kind of just fall into place. Which I got from the dean of the honors college at Alabama, which I kind of just dissed you that I said the best college admissions advice I got was from someone else. But
that's quite all right. It's coming from a dean at a college. I think I'll take it.
Yeah, just know what you're looking for in the first place, and your application strategy, your essays, your activities, everything will fall into place if you just sit down and actually say out loud, here's what I want in college.
And by the way, for those who are out there, if you're like, I can't do that, or my child can't do that, I also, a caveat to that, feel free to have them write it down if they can't say it. And if still your child cannot say why they want to go to college, then guess what? They're going to struggle in category 4, which is your story. But have no fear, we have entirely free resources for you in the college confidence community. You can go into section 2 and actually go through our category 4 of admissions lesson that has worksheets on how to help your child understand their story. So then you go through those worksheets, you come back, and all of a sudden you might ask them again, and they might say, I can actually answer that question. And that is going to help you on your college admissions journey. I love it, Jack. Fantastic. Thank you so much. Please do keep in touch. Every once in a while, we may have you write a guest blog just so that all the parents out there who have been so impressed with your writings can follow you. But you're obviously bound for great things, and I appreciate all the work you did this summer.
Appreciate it. Loved working for you.
Fantastic. Have a good one.
You as well.